Awesome. Well, I think I'll get started with a couple intro slides just to give some newcomers some background on what we're doing here. But thank you all for coming. Panelists, thank you so much for being here. Really looking forward to hearing more about your story and talking about consulting with you. As a little bit of a background on STEMxx Chats, this is another thing that has been brought to you by COVID in this transformed world that we're living in now. This initiative is really all about empowering young women in STEM and exposing really the personal dimension of careers, of career paths, and providing that personal support really to everyone. So we're a community that is definitely open to all. We're really focused on building an ecosystem of empowerment and breaking down barriers between career stages that often exist, often not intentionally, it's just the way things happen. And we want to pass along information better and really propel positive change makers to solve the big challenges of our day. Put our heads together, make impact a priority, and work together to make it happen. One of the things that we're doing and that this panel is part of is exposing, as I mentioned, this personal dimension of careers. We have a couple things in the works, new initiatives that will become the priority in the spring. So stay tuned for that, but we really want to better understand this personal dimension and extract learnings from everyone's path, which is so unique, right? Everyone has his or her own very unique path, but there's a lot of common threads as well. And so we want to learn from that and help students, help young people understand those things better to be able to prepare better. This panel is the second to last panel of the semester. I can't believe it. Time has really flown by. So in December, we'll talk about career paths in education to wrap up our fall series. And we'll wrap up our interviews with top women in STEM in December as well for this semester. And that's with Tina Seelig, who is a professor at Stanford, big innovation, creativity guru, and highly recommend watching some of her TED Talks before you come to this interview to get a little bit of a background on Tina. And to stay in touch with us, you can check out our website and follow us Instagram, Twitter, stay in touch. There's some email lists you can get on, or follow us for all the latest on social media. Okay, so without further ado, I'm really excited to welcome all of our awesome panelists. And I thought it would be best if they can introduce themselves, because I feel like, you know, I can give your short version of your bio, but nobody tells your story like you can. So perhaps each of you can introduce yourself and kind of talk about your journey heretofore and paint a little bit of the background. Perhaps Jessica, would you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Ungerleiter. I am a senior associate consultant at Clarion Healthcare, which is a life science consulting firm. And first of all, I just want to say thanks so much to Alice for organizing this. We overlapped very briefly at MIT, but it was great to meet you, and I'm glad to see you're doing something like this. I think it's super important. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
For my background, I recently transitioned into consulting. I started a little under a year ago at Clarion, and before that, I was a postdoc at MIT. I was thinking that I actually wanted to be an industrial scientist. So after my PhD in bioengineering at UC San Diego, I decided to come to MIT to do organ on a chip research with the intent of being an industrial scientist. And during that time, I realized that the most exciting parts of the science to me were the translational parts and how you think about creating a product that will benefit patients. So to me, that was really when I became aware of consulting, and specifically I was interested in life science consulting. So yeah, I made the jump to Clarion, and now I work on strategy projects, more early stage. I think the PhD lends itself well to that, but happy to answer any questions about the transition or yeah, anything.
Very good. Awesome. Wonderful to have you. Let's see. Amanda, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Hey everyone, and Alice, thanks for inviting me. So I know Alice from our Princeton days, very briefly. So I studied biology and neuroscience in undergrad, and then came out, and everyone around me was interviewing for these consulting jobs, which I had no idea what they meant. But I decided to go ahead and apply, and I ended up at IBM doing something completely unrelated to what I'd studied, doing consulting for them. And after a few years, I realized I really enjoyed a business aspect. So I went to business school. And now I've been at McKinsey for about a little over a year now. And I specialize mostly in healthcare and pharma industry consulting.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Renew.
Course. Hi, everyone. I'm Rainey Contragenta. I overlap with Alice at Stanford. Alice is actually the first person I ever met at Stanford. I don't know if you know that, Alice.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so cool. That's going to be my claim to fame one day.
Yeah, so I'm Rainey. I studied biomedical engineering when I was an undergrad. And when I was an undergrad, I thought I was going to go down the research path, thought I was going to get a PhD, but I spent a couple years in a research lab and realized that perhaps it was not for me. I wanted to see, I was more interested in the translational aspect, I think similar to Jessica, and I wanted to see, the impact that I might be able to have on patients a little bit earlier. And so I went down the route of, thinking I would go into medical device design and thinking I would go build medical devices. And then I interned at a medical device company and realized that I did not like that either. And then it finally came to me that I was really interested in kind of the business side of things, and thinking more about the high level strategy. And so after I finished up my master's at Stanford in bioengineering, I joined my current consulting firm, Eversana Management Consulting. And I've been with the firm for 3.5 years at this point. So I'm currently an associate principal there. And I tend to focus a little bit more on commercial strategy. So I do a lot of launch strategy, brand strategy, things like that. But yeah, excited to be here, excited to talk to you all. And thanks to Alice for inviting me.
Very good. Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, so very cool. I think these are really great stories, and you did a great job of, kind of painting the picture leading up to where you entered the consulting world as well. Maybe we can dig a little bit more into that. Like, what was it about consulting in particular, right? Not only what was it not, but what was it about consulting in particular that was a draw for each of you?
I can start. For me, I've always been a consultant, jumping from 2 different companies, and I've always enjoyed just being able to tackle new projects all the time. Like any new project you take on, you finish it, and you know that there's something new just around the corner.
Yeah, I mean, I would totally agree with that. That was a big draw of consulting for me. I think, and part of the big reason I was kind of nervous about industry was because I have a short attention span, and I was like, I don't know if I can stick with one product and one company forever. So that's why I really like consulting. I like being able to hop from product to product, client to client, things like that. I also like that with consulting, you get to be involved with these big strategic projects, like right from the beginning once you join consulting. And it really feels like you're making an impact for your end clients and helping them shape what they want to do with their product and what direction they want to go. So that's really exciting as well.
Yep, I don't have anything to add. That was great.
Very good. Awesome. Well, I think the next question and again, these questions were crowdsourced from different students that are really interested in consulting. And so we'll highlight a couple things here. But the second question is really the highlights. What have been the highlights for you? Perhaps a favorite project, a favorite case. What impact did that have? What are some of the highlights for you? Anybody want to kick us off?
I guess, yeah, I can talk about a favorite project. A little bit earlier on when I joined, I was on a immunology strategy project. So we were helping our client basically craft their entire immunology franchise strategy for the next 10 to 15 years. And they are players in immunology, but they wanted to really expand their footprint and maintain their leadership there. So It was a longer project than normal. Our strategy projects tend to be about 8 weeks long, so about 2 months. This one was like, I think almost 4 months, and it involved multiple workshops with the client. So we were like interviewing different stakeholders in R&D and the commercial side, figuring out stuff in their pipeline that they were super excited about, that they wanted to keep working on, but also like new technologies, new cell therapies or gene therapies or things that they wanted to invest in. And so coming from like a tissue engineering background, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like all the stuff I studied in my PhD and my postdoc. And it's so cool that these technologies are being commercialized and this company is thinking about investing in where they should invest and which diseases they should go after. So it was basically distilling a huge universe of all therapies and all diseases in immunology, and like what are the most exciting things that we should think about doing in the next 10 to 15 years. Where can we make an impact? So it was like a really fun, I think, intro to strategy, and also felt like a really impactful area. And so yeah, that was my favorite project recently.
I can go next and give I mentioned that I do mostly pharma and healthcare, but one of my favorites actually in tech. So there is a study that was really a blue sky question, and the client basically asked, what can we do to improve this company? Very, very broad, and we broke it down, and I was in charge of figuring out like what are some of the potential target acquisitions. We laid it all out within 2 weeks, and then right after that meeting, the client honed in on one particular question, which was their sales org, and asked, how can we improve this? And so me not knowing anything about sales, and my other two colleagues, we had to dive right in and figure out everything there was to know about sales and B2B, tech clients. That was another 4 weeks of work. And so similar to Jessica, this is around our time frame of like, 2 to 8 week projects. And the end result was that we ended up publishing an internal paper on it, and I'm now considered an expert in B2B sales. I just had a call about today. But very, very different. You learn all sorts of new things, and I'm very excited to just learn new industries and new skills at every project.
Very cool.
That's awesome. And I guess I'll close out. So similar, I think my favorite project was also on the longer side. So we were working with a client that had a product for a chronic condition, but the team we were working with was actually a completely above brand team. So they weren't allowed to do anything with the product. Their whole goal was, how can we get hospital systems in the US and EU to implement these coordinated care programs to help identify, diagnose, and give these patients some type of treatment, whether that was the client's treatment or any other treatment. And so that was a little bit of a unique opportunity, because a lot of the times the teams that we're working with are very much focused on their product and how can they help their product succeed. So it was pretty interesting to help them kind of develop their overall strategy of how they should be approaching these hospitals, how they could engage with them. And then we actually went down the route of all the way down to kind of training their field force on the appropriate engagement approach and what they should be doing to try to get these care programs implemented. And I think I really like that project, because one of the big reasons I shifted away from wanting to do research was because I wanted to see impact for patients. And with that project, and because we were able to kind of stay connected with that team, we got updates in terms of which hospitals are actually implementing care programs because of these efforts. How many patients are now getting diagnosed when they might not have gotten diagnosed previously. So that was really cool. It was a really cool effort to be part of. It was definitely on the longer side. So this spanned 2 years, and we're still doing, additional ad hoc work with them here and there, but it was definitely an interesting project, a little bit different from what we normally do.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, so now stepping back a little bit, big picture takeaways. What do you think are things that people should know about consulting before they get into it? Right? What would be like maybe your first reaction to that question first? What do they need to know before they pursue it?
I can start. I mean, I think one of the big things that everyone tells you about consulting is oftentimes they're going to be long hours. So it definitely cycles with your projects. Sometimes there are shorter days, sometimes there are longer days. So that's one of the big things, and it's really important to kind of figure out how you want to maintain your work-life balance and kind of coordinate with your project teams to try to maintain that, to avoid falling into that kind of standard trap of consulting, which is like, oh, you work crazy hours all the time. It is possible to navigate in certain situations, I think, as long as you keep those lines of communication open, but consulting it does often have those long hours, and that's just something to kind of be aware of, I think, before jumping into it. That said, I think there are lots of rewards. Like I said, from the beginning, you get to be involved with these very strategic, very interesting projects kind of from the get-go. So that's a little bit of the trade-off that you're getting. But yeah, I mean, that's just something that I was kind of expecting when I started consulting. Still took me a little bit by surprise when I joined, but was able to eventually navigate that. But yeah.
That's great.
I would say, to add on different aspect, is that imposter syndrome is pretty common, and it's totally expected. You're not going to be an expert on whatever project you start. A lot of times it's all about enthusiasm and willingness to dive deep and learn more.
I think the last thing I would add is the nature of the work is very temporary and fast-paced and short-term, which I think has good sides to it and bad. So on the one hand, you get to be exposed to a lot of different projects and different clients and different ways of working, that if you're thinking about going into that industry afterwards, if you don't want to stay in consulting forever, it's great exposure. But on the other hand, when you leave a project, you're really leaving it. You might hear from the client on how things are going, or you might continue to work with that client on continued projects, but you might just leave it in their hands, and then you never sort of see what happens to it. And so if you like owning things and carrying things through, sometimes you don't, get the opportunity to do that. So like I said, it can be a good thing and a bad thing depending on what you like.
There are different versions of consulting where you do end up seeing things through, though. So like, I'm not sure about other organizations. I think most consulting firms now do have implementation and operation arms where they are more longer term and making sure things go through.
Very good. Cool. And what about travel? I think travel is something that a lot of people wonder about, right? It seems like this can be a little bit firm dependent, a little bit industry dependent. Did you guys talk a little bit about that as well? Anybody want to take a stab at that? Renew?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I mean, it's definitely very firm dependent. I mean, there are some firms that have, what you think of the more standard consulting model where, you're traveling and you're at the client site 4 days a week. Obviously with COVID, everything is different. But pre-COVID, you were traveling to the client site. But then there's also a lot of firms where they do more local staffing, and that's what my firm does, for example. Like, we will travel to client sites for like key meetings and things like that. But for the most part, we're working in an office, and really dealing with a lot of our local clients. But again, it's totally firm dependent in terms of what that travel policy looks like. I think you can find a firm that fits what you're looking for in terms of, if you really want to travel, there's definitely firms that allow you to do that. And if you don't want to travel, there's firms that allow you to do that too.
Cool. Awesome. And what about preparation? I think a lot of students are wondering about, what classes, what experiences maybe would be good, would be necessary in order to get that first job. Any recommendations, or as you think back on that?
I mean, I'll just jump in. I think almost all consulting firms will probably have some form of a case. There's lots and lots of materials available online to learn how to case prep. There's like standard books, like Case in Point is kind of the common prep case book for consulting interviews. So almost all firms will have some type of case prep. I think before you get to the interview process, I mean, sometimes that helps to have, some at least exposure to business. Like, I don't think you have to take a ton of business classes or anything like that, but so you can at least demonstrate to the firm that you're applying for that you have some sort of inclination towards business, whether that is through your extracurriculars or anything like that, just to show that you are interested in the business side of things as well. But again, you don't have to go super, super heavy on the business side of things. Yeah, those are just some initial thoughts.
Yeah, I would add on, I don't really think there are any classes that really prepare you for consulting. But I think just the curious mindset, and I would say in addition to business, a lot of companies are looking for leadership qualities. And in addition to the case interview, there's always a behavioral portion, which at least in certain firms are weighted pretty equally. So focus on the behavioral as much as you focus on the case.
Very cool. Yeah, hoping to dive a little bit more into the application in a little while. So I think it's great that you kind of set the stage for that. And I'll also chime in here to say, reminder to the attendees, feel free to put questions in the Q&A, and then you can upvote them as well, so we can select what questions we'll take to our panelists when we're ready. Jessica, did you have anything to add to that?
Nope. I think for life science, if you're interested in that, just being on top of like the latest news and what companies are, putting out there is what was helpful for me. But yeah.
Very good. Yeah, actually, maybe let's do that now. Let's talk about advice you have for people who are actively applying or considering applying to consulting roles. I mean, what advice do you have in terms of preparing for case interviews or for that process in general?
I would say before you start preparing for case, or maybe in parallel, reach out and talk to people in the firms and in the offices that you're interested in. Every firm has a different culture. Every office within a firm sometimes has a different culture. So it's great to get to know what you're getting into.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. Definitely do your research on the firms as well, right? Like, I think, at least for us, we pay attention to, have you done the research on our firm, and do you know a little bit about what we do and the types of projects that we do? Because you'd be surprised. There's a lot of folks who apply who are just kind of broadly applying, and it's very clear to us that, they're probably not interested in our firm and what we do. And so that's something that we do look for. Totally agree with Amanda that you should definitely be setting up those conversations to, to be able to learn a little bit more about what that firm does and be able to talk about that. And then in terms of prepping for the case, I would say the biggest piece of advice I would have is try to find a buddy who's also trying to prep for consulting, and find a buddy to practice those cases with, because that's just going to help set you up for success. And with a buddy, you can trade feedback and things like that, and it'll make it a little bit easier once you do get into that interview stage, and you are having to do it live in front of an interviewer.
Yeah, and I think related to the preparation for the interviews, but also actually I just thought of something related to your earlier question, Alice. Definitely there are clubs and groups at universities and institutions that are either allowing you to do case practice or case competitions with other folks at the university, or even just like kind of consulting clubs or different project-based work that you could actually work on those projects in sort of a low stress scenario. Maybe some schools have like pro bono casework type things, setups, and I think that's a great experience too, to see if it's something that you like. And if you're not sure about whether you want to do it or not, like, you can actually just do it and try some of the projects and see if it resonates with you.
That's great. Very good. Are there any particular programs that come to mind for that? Jessica or anyone else that you would want to kind of put on people's radar while we're talking about it?
I think it's really institution dependent. A lot of universities will have just consulting clubs or advanced degree consulting clubs or biotech consulting clubs. So yeah, honestly, to be perfectly honest, I actually never did any of that when I was in school and in grad school. So it wasn't until I got to my postdoc where I was like, oh, maybe I would like this. So I can't speak to it personally. I was involved in entrepreneurship in undergrad and did not case competitions, like you know, pitch competitions for my startup. But so maybe that was somewhat analogous, I guess, but not quite the same.
Very good. Okay. Wonderful. We have some good questions coming in through the Q&A, and please keep on doing that. So I want to take one that is here in the chat about understanding the culture of the firm. So the advice about, you know, getting to know the culture, getting to know the people, setting up these kind of informational interviews. The question is, what are some ways to gauge that response? Either questions that you can ask, or what would be other ways that you could kind of gauge maybe the company culture? Anybody want to take a stab at that, Renu?
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like a common thing that people ask me is they'll just ask me, how would you describe the culture at your firm? And then, like, based on that, and based on the response that I give, like, it's good to like kind of probe on different aspects, right? So if I say like, oh, you know, we're like work hard, play hard, you know, follow up on the specific things that the person mentions when you open up with that initial question of like, how would you describe your culture? I mean, I think outside of that, a few other things that are probably good to ask if you're trying to get to know a firm is, you know, trying to understand what professional development and training opportunities look like at the firm, trying to understand the different project types that the firm does, you know, just try to ask questions to get to know what it would be like to work at the firm, and to try to see if like the project types are even of interest to you, or you know, just the general, you know, approach that the firm takes to different project types, and helping to support their team.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different operating models that firms operate under. So some firms, as Renu mentioned, don't travel at all. Some of them work directly from the office. Some firms have consultants working on multiple projects at the same time, whereas others are dedicated one project at a time. There's all these operational components you can ask as well.
Very good. And what led each of you to choose your particular firm? Was there anything that jumped out to you in that process that you knew that this would be a good fit for you?
I mean, I think for me, I'll go ahead and start. I wanted to work at a smaller firm. I mean, during like one of my internships, I was at a very big company, and I didn't really like that. I liked the opportunity to get to know my team a little bit better, and that's why I was a little bit more focused on more of the boutique, smaller shop consulting firms. I like the idea of being able to grow with a company, and you know, when I interviewed at my current firm, you know, a big thing that was stressed to me was, you know, the entrepreneurial mindset that they have, or where, you know, even if you come in as a new hire, as an associate or something like that, you can still be very involved in shaping kind of the direction, and being involved with internal initiatives and things like that to help shape the direction. And that's something that appealed to me. And that's kind of a big part of why I ultimately chose to come with this firm, and why I've stayed with the firm for as long as I have.
I guess I can go. So for me, I knew I wanted to stay in life science. And I think there was another question on the Q&A that I saw that was, does your firm do anything else? And we don't. We're just a life science and healthcare consulting firm. We do both strategy and operational side of things. So we get kind of both of those, but yeah, just life science. But so yeah, so I, similar to Renu, I knew I wanted to stay in a small firm, focus on the life sciences. I also would encourage any advanced degree candidates, if there are any of you out there, a lot of the firms do special programs for those students. So PhDs, MDs, you can go on site for a couple days, usually over the summertime, before you're ready to apply. And I think that's a great opportunity to get to know people at the firm and figure out if you like the culture and if you like the people. For me, that intangible quality of like, I actually get along with these guys and I like having a drink with them or whatever. It's like, those are the people you're going to be spending a lot of time with. So it's good to see how you vibe with them.
Yeah, and I can finish up. So for me, I wanted the opposite of Renew. I wanted a large a large firm because I wasn't sure where I wanted to end up location wise. And so just having that option of being able to relocate to any city in the US almost and still have my job was great. For me personally, I also I wanted a firm that had a lot of different industry exposure because I had experience in tech, but I really wanted also some experience in other things. So for me, just having that wide scope of different industries, different geographic locations was a huge consideration.
Very cool. Well, just as would be expected of consultants, we really blazed through all of my questions very efficiently. So that was very impressive, unprecedented in a panel that we've had. So this leaves a lot of great time for the Q&A, which is really exciting. And maybe we can dig into some specifics. And I think it's also great because, as you've mentioned, there's so much variety within consulting. So I think it's great we kind of dig into some of this. So one of the questions in the Q&A is related to the different firms that you've applied to. So could you talk about which types of firms and why you ultimately chose the firm that you would work at now? So you talked about kind of the reasons you ended up in your particular firm currently, but what were other places that you applied to in terms of maybe the number or variety in that application process?
I guess I can go first. So I applied to both generalist firms and just life science. And I think I really figured it out during the interview process, actually, just doing the casework and doing the interviews at the different firms, the type of cases that I was like super excited to like solve and like write it out and figure out what was going on were all the ones like in pharma. And I know that you can join a generalist firm and stay in pharma. But I think for me, it's like, I just know this is what I want to do. So why, not do that? And so that was one thing. And then I think even within the boutique firms, there's a lot that focus on one very specific thing. So there's some life science firms that really do a lot of pricing analyses and figure out how should we price these drugs. And like, that's really cool. And that's really important. But I wanted to be exposed to breadth of projects and types of work. And so figuring out, I think both of the other women on the panel were saying that, you can figure out the type of casework that your firm does and figure out what resonates with you. And yeah, hopefully that was a little helpful.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that. I think I was in almost an identical situation to Jessica. I applied to both generalist and the smaller boutique life sciences focused firms. And through the interview process, sometimes I would get cases in the interviews that were about like, different types of metals. And, it was interesting to think about those, but like, that's not really what I wanted to do and what I wanted to focus on. And so, through that process, I realized like, I want to focus on something that is life sciences focused. And then after that, through the interview process, and I think, just meeting the people and getting to know the individuals and, would I get along with these people? If I have to work a late night, am I okay doing that in an office with these individuals? And that's kind of what was the deciding factor for me.
Yeah, I think, so I went through a bit of a different process because I applied from business school. Like in undergrad, when I joined consulting, I literally just applied to two consulting firms and one of them wanted me. So that's different. But for grad school, it's a bit, for business school, it's a bit of a different process where if you show that you are interested in a specific industry like consulting or banking or whatnot, those firms will start reaching out to you. And then the whole business school process is designed so that you get to know those firms very, very specifically. And so you end up deciding which ones you want to apply for early on, and then focusing on more outreach and more preparation on their style of casing and their style of interviews.
Very cool. All right, so this is STEMxx Chats. You all have backgrounds in STEM related fields. And I think for a lot of people who are passionate about STEM, they want to know, once you're consulting, is it just business, right? Or how much of the science do you feel like you get in your day, or you get exposed to, you get to work with?
Well, just to take it super literally, I mean, aspects of every part of STEM are super important in consulting. So the engineering, I think for me, I was surprised by how similar it is. So consulting is just essentially problem solving, and you're working on teams to solve problems, and that's what engineers do. I mean, you know, you're working within constraints and you're balancing trade-offs, and that's, yeah, it's the same kind of process. So that to me was really intuitive, and something that I found that I was used to from my education, just even as an engineer, doing so many group projects and in classes and things like that. So that's one. The math, like if you're interested in forecasting at all, like we do a ton of it. So that's a great opportunity. And then the science, yeah, I definitely think it depends on the type of project, but even if you're in a super operational, like commercial or launch project or something like that, it really helps if you actually have a deep knowledge of whatever the product is, and you know, whether that's the biotech or pharma industry, it seems like the three of us are coming from, or whether that's another industry that is based on science or technology. Just having that background, I think, is super helpful, whether we're talking to internal stakeholders at the client and knowing our stuff, or whether we're interviewing, like we do a lot of physician interviews. And so, you know, being able to talk in the same language that they speak in is super helpful as well. So I think there's many different points where it comes in along the process of being in consulting, but I think it's actually very, very relevant. So don't worry.
Yeah, I would say a lot of what we do is setting up a hypothesis and finding the materials or data to support it. So it's very similar to, you know, what we did in college. But it also really depends on the project. So like the current project I'm on, we're looking at pipeline going into Asia region. And so you have to know some information about the compounds, the indications, the pathway. And these are all things that really help when you have a STEM background, or specifically a bio background.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. I think Jessica and Amanda covered it all.
Very good. Wonderful. Okay, we have another question. How much of a say do you get on the projects you're assigned to?
A lot. At least at my firm, we're not assigned to projects. I kind of equate it to a constant job hunt, or if you're in demand, a constant batting away of potential jobs. It really all just depends what's the supply and what is your personal asset.
Yeah, I think it also depends firm to firm. So my firm, you know, we're a little bit smaller, and so you know, sometimes there's not as many options, just because, you know, we're short on staff, and you know, there's a project that needs to be staffed. That said, I think most firms will try to do a good job of, if the individual is very vocal about the types of projects that they're interested in. Ideally, the leadership at your firm will try to take that into account, and once that project type comes up, they'll try to find an opportunity. And hopefully, if you're not already staffed on a project, or if you have some bandwidth, then that's something that you can hopefully be staffed on as well. So it's definitely firm dependent, but I think there are opportunities to get your voice heard and get exposure to the types of projects that you're interested in.
Yep, I agree with Renew. Probably similar, similar experience.
Very good. Awesome. Okay, so we have a question here related to, well, it's addressed to Renew. If you thought you wanted to stay in research after undergrad and get a PhD, how did you accumulate more business experience that allowed you to be a competitive applicant to consulting firms?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, I did research. I think a big part of it is just trying to find the opportunities via classwork. So like I took a lot of classes in at Stanford. I took classes in our management science and engineering department, where there was some exposure to, you know, business cases and working with business school students and things like that. I think a lot of schools will have some type of program where if it is a consulting club, for example, like Jessica mentioned, that's a really great opportunity to try to get some of that business experience. I think there's also some classes, like I had some classes both at Hopkins and at Stanford where I was working on like medical device design projects that had a little bit of that business experience. And then when I was applying to consulting firms, I was able to play up that part of the experience, like, oh, we joined these business plan competitions, or we developed like kind of the marketing strategy for how we would go to market with this product. So I think there's opportunities to do that through your extracurriculars. And then I think, as Jessica mentioned, Consulting Club is a really, really great opportunity to really build those skills. I also know that outside of consulting clubs, like within your schools, sometimes different regions and like different areas will have additional consulting types of programs. So I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, and so there's like this Bay Area Connect type of program where people who are interested in consulting can join that kind of club or organization and get to do pro bono consulting work as well. So there's lots of opportunities to explore, but I would say start with classwork. If there are options to take classes at your school's business school or anything in the entrepreneurial business-y mindset, that'll help. And then outside of that, try to get as much exposure to additional consulting-y types of projects as much as you can.
Very good. And Jessica, did you have anything to add to that, coming from a similar transitional situation?
Not really. I mean, from an academic background, I think that there are ways to get involved as well and learn more about the business side coming from the academic context. So if you're in a research lab or anything, there are grants called SBIRs, which is like a small business innovation research grant that is designed to help commercialize things outside of academic labs. And so in the process of applying for that grant, you have to think about the business implications or the commercial implications of the technology that you're developing. So that's kind of a skill, like you could slot it into your research time. Or tech transfer offices, that was the other thing I was going to say, at universities. Oftentimes they'll have great resources or just to get exposed to that side of it, but still coming from the academic tilt.
Very cool. Okay, so the next upvoted question, do you change teams within your firm with each new project? Maybe a little explanation of like maybe team structure, how that works within your group, within your whole firm. A little bit of an overview. Anybody want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I can go ahead and start. So yes, we change teams with every project. I mean, a lot of the times there will be overlap, right? So if there is a manager that you work particularly well with, maybe that manager will reach out and try to get you on their next project once that new project sells. But there usually is a little bit of a shuffle. In terms of what the team structure looks like, I think that's super dependent firm to firm, super dependent project to project. My firm's a little bit smaller, and so our teams are a little bit smaller. And so typically our project is, one manager, maybe 1 to 2 of kind of the team that will actually be supporting the project, and then kind of a more senior leadership individual. And that's kind of the standard, but then that flexes pretty heavily. If it's a more intense project or a less intense project, we can kind of go back and forth and flex accordingly. But I think that's pretty firm dependent.
Yeah, I would say very firm dependent. On some of the operational projects, I've seen maybe up to like 3 managers and like 7 individual contributors. On some of the smaller projects, it could be anywhere from your standalone associate or business consultant to, EM plus engagement manager plus 3, I think is usually the normal.
Yep, same here.
Very good. Awesome. I also wanted to ask kind of about if as much as you're willing to share here, but about some long-term plans, getting into consulting. Jessica, you mentioned a little bit about kind of, thinking to the future, but what would you say is kind of like the average tenure in consulting that you've seen in your experience? And then for yourselves, kind of as you look down the road, what do you think are your goals for the future?
I guess I can go. Well, I probably have seen the least since I've been in consulting the shortest out of the three of us here. But I think that people typically stay at our firm anywhere from like, I don't know, 2 to 3 years to like 5+. And there's definitely growth opportunities within the firm. For people who leave, I think it kind of varies. A lot of people go into business development or strategy roles, as well as even like market research type roles, for those who are more heavily involved in those types of projects. I think for me, I'm still really early on, so still undecided, but I love this opportunity to like get exposed to all different clients that we work with and kind of figure out like what they do that I like and what they do that I don't like. I think right now the roles that excite me the most are like pipeline strategy type roles. So these are the people in maybe a therapeutic area that are trying to figure out, okay, here's all the drugs that we have in our pipeline, you know, what should we develop or what should we not develop, or what should we invest in, what should we acquire that can make us super strong in whatever therapeutic area we're going after, and looking at that like super big picture 30,000 foot view, but also being involved in like, this is really exciting clinical data that we're generating. And you know, maybe I'm getting too deep into the life sciences, but yeah, that's my perspective at the moment.
Very good. Awesome. Renew?
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in. I mean, I think similar in that most of the folks at our firm, you know, anywhere from 2 to 4 years before they decide to exit, usually to some type of industry role. And it varies, again, very similar roles to I think what Jessica mentioned. I think for me, I joined consulting thinking that I would stay for like 2 years and then exit to industry. And here I am 3.5 years later. And I think a big part of that is, you know, I feel like there's still a lot of opportunities for me to learn within consulting. There's a lot of, like, I've had the opportunities to work on a variety of different project types, but there's still a ton more that I've never had exposure to. And so that part of it keeps me wanting to keep exploring and wanting to see what else is out there to figure out, you know, is there that client type of or client role that I would be particularly interested in and want to be sitting on kind of the other side. I personally haven't found that just yet. I feel like consulting is still a little bit more exciting. It's more challenging for me personally at this time, but I mean, in the future, hopefully I do find that alternative role and can, you know, switch out into something like that. But yeah.
Great. Amanda, did you want to comment on anything there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on which role you're in at my firm. The fresh from college hires are hired in as analysts, and they tend to leave at 1 or 2 years because there's programs where the company will pay for any advanced degree you decide to get. So that's a great opportunity. And associates who come in at the advanced program or at the MBA level, we tend to stay for, I would say, about the same as what Jessica and Renew mentioned, 2 to 4 years. Some people from the BA level might not go and get an advanced degree. They might just stay and fast track it to partner.
Very good. All right, so there's another question about how to stay on top of news and current events related to, you know, perhaps your current field or, you know, things that could be relevant in the future for you related to the industry. Have you found any particular news sources or resources, habits for keeping on top of that would be transferable? I think we have a fair amount of life science people in the audience that would be interested, and so I think you can comment on your particular field as well, if you'd like. Any resources to share? Tips, tricks?
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in. When I first started consulting, I think one of the first few kind of newsletters I would sign up for were like Fierce Biotech and Fierce MedTech and Stat News. I think those are very life sciences focused, but it was nice to just get those in my inbox. And, you know, when I had time, I would just kind of skim through, look at the headlines, and click on the few articles that seemed interesting and like read them when I had a little bit of a break. I'm sure that there are very similar kind of emails for other types of STEM fields. So I guess I would just encourage you to try to look out for what those might be for your particular field. But for life sciences, I still get those subscriptions to Fierce Biotech and things like that. But yeah.
I think too, there are some blogs and sort of like newsletters that prominent folks in the life science industry will put out. So Life-Sci VC is by Bruce Booth, who's a partner at Atlas, which is one of the big life science VC firms. And he has like a good, series of articles that he'll publish. There are various things like that as well that I think are, they're individual person's perspectives and maybe come out less regularly than the daily news, but just an additional perspective to keep in mind. But I agree, I love Fierce and I do endpoints as well. I'll add that to the list.
Very good. Amanda?
Nothing to add. I mostly do Fierce and my internal newsletters.
Very good. Cool. What are some programs in boutique firms that are similar to Advantage or McKinsey Insights, etc.? Anybody want to have something to offer to that?
I can do a shameless plug. Clarion has a program called Propel for advanced degree candidates every summer. I think Clearview also has one as well. I forget what it's called, but definitely check out their website. Those are the two that come to top of mind, but I'm sure there are many others. And I would just suggest, as we all mentioned earlier on in the session, even if you can't find information about it, if you get in touch with folks at the firm, whether that's through LinkedIn or whatnot, or through their website, maybe they would announce a program like that. Those are good ways to learn about them.
Awesome. Anything else? If not, Renew?
I was just going to say, nothing too much on my end. I mean, just to echo though, most of the websites will include some information if they do offer a program, but there are definitely opportunities even if it's not something that's advertised. So for example, my firm, we don't have a formal program for advanced degree candidates, but we do kind of rolling internships throughout the year, and it can be for short or as long as the individual is interested in. So it's not something that we advertise a ton, but if someone reaches out and they express that they're interested, it's something that you can find out through those types of conversations. So definitely encourage those.
Great. Wonderful. So I'd like to give each of you just a few minutes, whatever you want to leave us with, parting advice, parting words to wrap up. I think we've covered a lot of territory and really given people some personal perspectives here into what these fields are like, what your career, what your job is like. We didn't touch too much on maybe your day-to-day, which I know can also vary a lot and can vary depending on the case and whatnot. But I guess in the remaining minutes, anything else you guys would want to share with us? The floor is yours. Does anybody want to kick us off?
Maybe I can kick it off. I'm an introvert and I was really worried about this whole client aspect of consulting, and I found out that almost everyone that I meet in my firm is an introvert. So don't be afraid if you are an introverted. You'll do fine. If you're extroverted, you'll do great as well. And pretty much there's a lot of different interaction models, and not to worry.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And I think just building off, I think what Amanda mentioned earlier, there's a lot of imposter syndrome, but you can definitely handle a lot of this. A lot of it is going to be very similar to the types of projects that you work on in school. It's just thinking about things in a little bit of a different way and taking that problem solving approach. There's lots of things where you'll start off in consulting and you'll be like, I've never done a project like that. I've never done X, Y, or Z. I don't know how I can do that. But you have a team behind you that will help guide you, and you will you're probably going to be able to pick it up very, very quickly. And consulting firms are set up to help you succeed and to give you the resources that you need to succeed. So don't be too worried about that, I guess, is the biggest advice I would say, because that's a big fear I had when I started. And I've found that time and time again, those fears are pretty unfounded.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have much to add. Yeah, imposter syndrome is real, I think, too. Don't like work too hard and prep too hard. I know that's like sounds counterintuitive, but really, I think Amanda mentioned this, but actually, like the firms are just trying to get to know you, and the behavioral component of like, can I work with this person is oftentimes just as important. And so keep that in mind. Like, yeah, try to it's hard to keep that perspective when you're applying to things and you don't have anything yet, and you're like, how can you tell me to like try less hard? But truly though, like have faith in yourself and believe in yourself, and like just be yourself, and you'll find somewhere that you fit. So good luck.
Very good. Awesome. Well, panelists, you have been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all of your words of wisdom, your story, your journey, your experiences with us, and taking the time on this Wednesday night. So thank you so much. And attendees, thanks for coming, and hopefully see you next time. Thank you so much, guys.
Alice.
Thanks, Alice.
Thanks, Alice.
Thanks for organizing.
Thank you, guys. Looking forward to seeing you in person one day soon.
Absolutely.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye.